Hello and welcome to the Soccer Business Podcast. I'm Simon Evans, and the biggest story this week in North American soccer business has without a doubt been the attempt by La Liga to bring a game to Miami, the latest attempt by them, which was approved this time by the Spanish Football Federation. I'm delighted to have us on the podcast here today, Sam Marsden, who is ESPN's correspondent in Spain. Sam, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, Simon. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so there's a background to all this, isn't there? This isn't just come out of the blue. It's been several years of particularly Javier Tebas, the leader of the Spanish FA, has been pushing for the opportunity to play in the United States, a regular season game. Obviously, we see friendly matches quite often. Just give us a little bit of the background to how we got to this point from the Spanish perspective.
Yeah, exactly. It's not something that's come out of the blue this week. I guess the significance of this week is it's the first time La Liga have had support from elsewhere in terms of the Spanish Federation also giving the green light to taking a game outside of Spain. But yeah, you have to go back to 2018, at least publicly, for the first time that sort of Tebas and La Liga spoke about their plans to play a game. It's always been in the United States, always been in Miami, always been at the Hard Rock Stadium. Through their collaboration with Relevant Sports, obviously well sort of known in the US, their collaboration with they're owned by the Miami Dolphins owner, Stephen Ross and whatnot. And they work with the German league, with the Spanish league in terms of promotion in the United States. And the first time, was 2018 when La Liga first signed their agreement with Relevant Sports. And at the time they announced or they said that what they hoped to do was to take the Girona-Barcelona game to the US in January 2019. That was the first one they wanted to take. The Barcelona president at the time, Jose Maria Bartomeu, and the Girona president, Delphi, they both signed or sort of agreed to take that match abroad. It was met with opposition from all sorts of quarters, including the federation at the time. Other areas as well, that it never got further down the line. I'm sure we'll talk about the process later in this podcast, who else needs to be involved, who needs to give it the green light. And it resulted in Barca eventually, because of the opposition. And it wasn't strong opposition in terms of, I guess, the one you always think back to is perhaps most recently is the Super League launch and the reaction in the UK. There certainly wasn't a reaction to that sense, fans on the street, lots of people against it. There was opposition from significant people, from players' associations, from the federation, as I said, which made Barca step back away from that game. So the following year, the same year, later that year in 2019, La Liga then tried to take Atletico Madrid Villarreal to Miami in December, again for similar reasons. That game never got off the ground, and then we obviously had the following year was the pandemic, which I guess kind of put the brakes on the project between Tebas and Relevant Sports, because obviously there were no crowds in Europe. There wasn't a time to take a game to the US, and it's something which has come back. It came back first last year with the suggestion that Barca, the aim to take Barca's home game against Atletico in December 2024 to Miami. That one again didn't quite get off the ground. The message from La Liga building up to it, I think even as close as sort of the beginning of November, was that they were still pushing for it to happen. It didn't happen, not just because of the pandemic. The reason that had also came back is because of, and I don't know if you've spoken about this on here before, there was a lawsuit because obviously there was opposition from FIFA, from US Soccer, and there was a lawsuit in that time, relevant Sports, against US Soccer and FIFA, which had been settled, which had supposedly sort of opened the door for this game. It still needed lots and lots of approval. There's so many people involved in having to approve this game on both continents. But because of that lawsuit, Tebas and La Liga were more confident that this Barca Atletico game could go ahead last year, but it didn't. And now they're back now with Barca Villarreal, and obviously got the backing of the federation this time, which is a significant step. But look, it's August. It's we've got 3 months to go. Is it September, October? 4 months until they want to play at the end of December. There's still significant hurdles, I think, to come around. But that's the situation now. It's something that's been going on for 7 years, and yeah, there's a little bit of a race this time, because obviously we've got I'm not sure completely, I don't know if you cover this, the Italy game, obviously Milan, because of the Winter Olympics, are hoping to play a game against Como in Australia. And that's Perth, also a little bit, Javier Tebas and La Liga are looking at that a little bit, and it's seen as a little bit of a race, who can be the first domestic league to play a game abroad, but B, also the idea that could go ahead because of the Winter Olympics and some sort of what would be the word, sort of more of an appetite from people around Italy to take that game there. Tebas is sort of thinking, well, if that can happen in Italy, then there should be no reason to stop us doing it in Spain as well.
Yeah, I mean, the lawsuit is I think, key to understanding a lot of this in the relevant after those failed attempts, going to court in New York against FIFA and, as you say, the US Soccer Federation, both of them settling. It was US Soccer who settled first. In neither of those settled cases did we get any official statement about what had been agreed or what was going on. But the fact that FIFA set up a working group then to look into how to handle these sort of situations, when the previous position had been a very simple hard no to all of this, as it was UEFA's position, I mean, led a lot of people to believe that that there was some sort of deal had been done. Drop the court case, which could have been a very long and damaging and expensive court case for both FIFA and particularly for US Soccer, which would have less budget for handling those sort of things. Led people to believe that there was, maybe a change of position coming from FIFA. We haven't had any indication at all what this working group's going to say, but it's hard to imagine the working group coming back and saying status quo, nothing's changing after they've settled the lawsuit, right?
Like you say, we're guessing a little bit and we're working on sort of theories and sort of understandings and people sort of leading you down thick ways without actually saying anything for sure. But like you say, with the settling of the lawsuit, the idea or the sort of way La Liga would have you see it is that opposition has lessened, certainly from FIFA, certainly from US Soccer. But what we are going to see now is, even if, like you say, that I think the important thing is that we don't have the full disclosure of what the settlement was. So we don't know exactly what went down or how it was. We do know, like you say, that FIFA have set up this working group. And if they've set up this working group, it is perhaps to try and find a solution or to see if it is possible or how it could happen. And it sort of was heading that way. But what we're going to see now we've seen the federation say that, yeah, this is a project that we would back, having previously under the previous president, Luis Rubiales, despite themselves having taken the Spanish Super Cup to Saudi Arabia, they've refused to allow this to happen. But under the new president, Rafael Luzan, they have green-lighted it, and they've said they send this request to UEFA and FIFA. Speaking to UEFA and FIFA this week, they've said they've not received that request. So until they do, they're not going to make a comment, sort of standard procedure, if you will. They don't want to get involved until it's further down the line. So the federation have said they sent this request. Both of those organisations are still saying they've not received this official request from the federation to take the game to the US, so they're not going to make a comment for now. So that's where we are. In the meantime, there's been sort of opposition from Real Madrid, and I guess this is where the FIFA working group will sort of be put to the test, or perhaps we'll find out a bit more what they're thinking, because Real Madrid have sort of said to FIFA and UEFA, look, you need to stop this for various reasons, because it adulters the competition in terms of Barca getting the chance to play. It's seen as Barca getting the chance to play an away game, in Miami, which is seen as favourable to them, as opposed to playing away against Villarreal.
Which is true, right? I mean, the stadium is going to be full of Barcelona fans, yeah?
Yeah, you'd imagine so, yeah. I mean, the Villarreal president was asked about that this week, and I don't have the exact stats to hand now, but he said, well, we've always lost to Barcelona at home and we've had better results to them away from home. But it is true that, going to Miami favours Barca more than it favours Villarreal, you would have imagined. So yeah, Real Madrid have actually presented the strongest opposition this week. We don't have opposition confirmed from US Soccer, FIFA, UEFA. The only strong opposition we have is from Real Madrid. There have been some other comments, obviously, we're speaking the week that La Liga starts, so there's been media opportunities with club managers, club presidents, etc. I think the Athletic club president has sort of suggested that he would be against it, and there've been sort of managers sort of suggest that there certainly hasn't been universal backing or any sort of backing from other clubs other than Barca and Villarreal. Obviously, in the past, Girona and Atletico have been in favour of playing a game in the US, so there's sort of mixed feelings from clubs. But yeah, we're at a pivotal juncture, really, that sort of in the coming weeks to see what UEFA and FIFA do and how they sort of respond to this request and to the strong opposition from Real Madrid. And I guess the other party involved is the Spanish sort of Professional Footballers Association, the AFE in Spain. As I understand it, they can't sort of veto this game. They don't have a say in terms of green lighting it, but they can certainly provide opposition. They can sort of appeal to courts. The Spanish they can go down the legal route in Spain, which organisations quite like to do to drag things out and can go from one court to another. Their main problem this week, they were obviously they were present, they had sort of representative President David Aganso, the president of the AFE, was at the federation meeting when they sort of green lighted it, and the from sources, sort of spokesman from the AFE said the main problem at the moment is that this is something that's happened without them being consulted at a time when players are being asked to travel more and more, play more and more. So they haven't officially said they're opposed to it yet, but what they want is more information. They want to be more involved in the process before they sort of make an official comment.
And before we get on to looking at the UEFA side of it, there's the fan groups as well. The organised fan groups in Spain have also been having their say. Yeah.
There has been sort of people that are against it, that are opposed to it. I mentioned this issue before. It's not the opposition you might expect or that we saw in England. If we go back, I think it was over 10 years ago now, the idea of the 39th game and games being played, especially the European Super League more recently, which was effectively shut down because of the reaction in England and by the English clubs who were involved. It's certainly not to that level. If you think the amount of Barca fans there are, how many there are, there's been very sort of, yes, there has been some sort of statements released by fan groups and whatnot saying that they're not in favour of it or whatnot, but it's certainly not a reaction which feels sort of something that you can overcome. Villarreal fans, obviously, some of them are not happy. The president, Roy, said this week that they would pay for anyone that wanted to go to Miami, and that anyone that didn't want to go, they would knock 20% off the price of their season tickets. I've not seen a reaction since he said that. Obviously, before they were
so free trip to Miami.
Free trip to Miami, yeah, if they want to go. I don't know if they could. I mean,
might be worth buying a Villarreal season ticket. Yeah,
I'm not sure what they'd say if everyone wanted to go, because I'd imagine the whole point of taking this game to the US, as much as they say, oh look, we want to take the fans as well. If you want to go, you can go. The whole point is the idea that Tebas sells is, we're opening ourselves to the US market. Playing a competitive game is the next step from these International Champions Cup and these friendlies that have been played there. Obviously, the Club World Cup already sort of beat them to that in terms of competitive games there this summer. But that's the idea, that this is a step into the American market and something that can generate money not just for the clubs that play the game, but for the whole league, sort of on a regular basis, a yearly basis, or however often they want to do it. And I guess the big one that he goes to on that is, obviously, it's quite sort of common procedure in American sports, as you know, the big American leagues in other sports do take games around Europe fairly successfully, as I understand it, and to little opposition. And I guess that's the sort of model that he's looking at.
Yeah, I mean, the big example is the NFL, isn't it? Who are playing in Madrid this year, right? I think.
First time, yeah.
At the Bernabeu. It's an interesting one because the NFL, there is a little bit of opposition to the NFL doing that, because teams only have like 8 home games a season. So if you're got a business that is operating around that stadium or inside the stadium, the food concession stands and so on, you're losing a big chunk there when they go and play. I mean, it's an eighth of your income for that season. So there's quite a lot of, and people with season tickets as well only get 7 games instead of 8. It's a much bigger deal. But the opposition, it's been sort of accepted that that's just what the NFL is going to do, and the teams want to do it, and there's clear commercial benefits for them in doing it. In terms of that side of it, just before we get into the sort of is it going to happen part of it, the why they want to do it. I mean, obviously there's money to be made out of it as a single event. Yeah. I mean, if they come to Miami, they will sell out the stadium. I mean, we saw that at the Club World Cup. For all the mixed, attendance stories, the Miami games pretty much all were, it's a 62,000 stadium. They were all 55, I think, was the worst attendance. Obviously it helped having Boca Juniors and Real Madrid playing there. But, the fact that Real Madrid basically sold out that stadium by themselves, and I'm sure Barcelona would do, they have done for friendly games they've played here, indicates that the game itself would sell out. It would be an attractive TV proposition and for the partners there and so on. I'm sure there'll be sponsorship stuff they can do around it. That single game will make money, will make several $1 million, I'm sure. If you're enjoying this podcast, why not sign up to our weekly newsletter at thesoccerbusiness.com for news, analysis, and data on the North American soccer business world. But there's a bigger picture, isn't there? I mean, I've been at these events, Soccer X and other conferences where Tebas over the years has come out and raged about the Premier League and seems very agitated that the Spanish league, on a commercial level, isn't taking on the Premier League, really. Just give us a bit of a sense of how that plays out, how motivated he is by that, or is it a calm sort of strategic sort of attempt to sort of expand the brand of La Liga in the US, or is there something else there as well?
Yeah, like you say, whenever Tebas speaks about it, he almost always, I would say, references the Premier League and this being a chance to close the gap on the Premier League. And this is an area where I'm a little bit skeptical for a couple of reasons. One, like you say, obviously Barca Villarreal is going to make money. Barca in pre-season can go to, Japan, South Korea like they did this year and make sort of 10, 15 million from games, as they say. It's probably a little bit less if those are the numbers coming from the club, but millions of euros going to play these friendlies, obviously in the US in previous summers as well. If it's a league game, you'd presume, like you say, all the stuff built in around it is going to make money for Barca, for Villarreal, for the league. Where I'm skeptical is how that sort of long term really does close the gap on the Premier League. The financial part, first of all, because La Liga is so far behind the Premier League financially. I'm not sure how much money that's going to add on in terms of, TV rights or whatnot to close the gap. We're speaking just before the start of the Premier League season when, Brentford are spending 42 million on a player who's sort of in and out of the Bournemouth team. And then you look at La Liga, and outside of Barca, Barca can't spend really because of the financial rules this time. They've been able to spend 25 million on a goalkeeper who's still not registered, but will be registered probably for the start of the season because of an injury to another goalkeeper. Real Madrid have been relying on free transfers increasingly. So even the big clubs aren't sort of spending sort of that sort of bigger money. But then once you get below them, clubs that historically should be way bigger and outspending the likes of Brentford and Bournemouth, Valencia, Sevilla, Real Betis, all these clubs, they don't have any money to spend on players. So I'm not sure how that one game with, even if they did have one game a year, I'm not sure of the business side of that, how that sort of closes the gap on the Premier League. And in terms of marketing as well, I'm not entirely sure how much the fact it's a competitive game completely changes the situation. I think there are some things that they can't fight against in the US. Obviously, the US is a big market for La Liga. Obviously, there's huge sort of communities from Latin America and South America. But I think a lot of it boils down to other things which are unrelated to taking a game to the US. Just simple things to do with the language of the league and whatnot. It depends. There's different markets in the US. Obviously there is huge support for Barca and Real Madrid. But I'm not quite sure of that logic on Tebas. Obviously, other things I don't know how involved how much of a personal coup it is for him, how much of that is a motivation. He obviously, like I say, pledges that it's good for the league, good for their clubs. You'd imagine, look, we don't know, so I can't say, but you'd imagine there are other reasons at play other than him just having this idea, whether it's an ego thing and you just want to, be the first person to take a game outside of Europe and sort of do that, whether it's almost just stubbornness now because he's been going for so long and saying it for so long that he wants to follow through with it, whether there's financial implications for the league beyond the clubs and whatnot. There must be other factors at play beyond, because maybe you can tell me. Obviously, I don't know how the benefits have been to NFL teams in terms of taking games away. Obviously, it's different because they don't have to compete with other leagues. They're just sort of a league in its own right. They don't have the Premier League, for example, as it is competition to a degree, but not to the same level as La Liga would see the Premier League as competition. So I'm not quite sure on that level how much of what Tebas says actually completely adds up in terms of how much it would benefit the league.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because, I've done quite a lot of stuff recently looking at the nature of the modern sort of younger demographic fan in the United States. And we had Oleg Löwenstein, who's the head of Univision, the main Spanish language broadcaster of soccer in this market. And we were talking about how, these modern Hispanic fans in the United States of America, which make up the bulk of the audience for La Liga, as you suggest, and they have these identities around clubs that are very not fluid, but open to lots of different clubs. So yes, they'll turn up in a Real Madrid shirt at a Club World Cup to support Real Madrid in Miami, but they might be Argentinian and support Boca Juniors as well. Or they might, I went and saw Juventus play in Orlando in the Club World Cup and took the train back down to Miami, and it was full of people in Juventus shirts who were all South American and spoke Spanish. And I would guess probably half of them supported Juve and Real in some way. As weird as that seems to Europeans, that's the way it is over here. So there are they're two massive brands over here who young people are attracted to through players or through just their prestige and so on. I'm not sure it makes a massive amount of difference to whether they get to see, that kind of fan wants to be around an event and see in person the players from that team. And yeah, it's probably better watching a real game than a friendly game. But in terms of that big picture of growing the brand against the Premier League or as an alternative to the Premier League, I don't think it'd make a massive amount of difference. So I'm skeptical about the impact of it. I mean, there's a negative side of it as well over here, which is, it's coming into a market that has a domestic league and potentially opens up the possibility of the Mexican league coming into the US, which should probably be more of a threat. But if we turn to what happens next, I mean, we expect it to go to UEFA next, yeah? I mean, UEFA, as I wrote in an article on our website this week, obviously have a very strong relationship with Relevant Sports, who are doing this. Relevant represent them for the Champions League and the other UEFA competitions in the US, and have a big arrangement overall with commercially with UEFA. Has there been any indications in Europe about whether UEFA might be sort of, given the fact that FIFA aren't taking necessarily the automatic no line, that might open the door for UEFA to sort of have a different stance than in the past?
I'm completely not sure about UEFA, to be honest. Like I say, we've been trying to sort of speak to them this week, and they're just sort of delaying, really, saying the request has not arrived. I'm sure there are people better placed than me with contacting UEFA who might have a better idea, but sort of on the base level from the sort of communications team, if you will, they're sort of pushing the issue for now. There's no indication that they would accept it in the past, but there's sort of no indication right now that they won't. So we're kind of slightly out of the loop. Like I say, perhaps the one to keep an eye on, which is one guidance I did get from UEFA, was the one that I mentioned before, this Milan Como game going to Australia. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how related the two will be, but that's sort of a more prominent issue perhaps to keep an eye on. I'm not sure what stage that's at, but that's one that's been with UEFA first of all, and as far as I know, has not been knocked back yet either, which suggests there is some stewing going on. But like I said before, my one doubt still, even though there is 4 months now, it's still quite short. I do think even if there was backing from UEFA, I think there would be challenges from Real Madrid and other teams in Spain. Perhaps not all the teams, as I've said, some have been involved in this project in the past. But yeah, I really don't know which way this is going to go in terms of that FIFA working group and UEFA. They're the ones that hold the keys for now. And I do think, even though there are other people involved, like you say, US Soccer, I think CONCACAF also have to sort of green light it finally if it does get to the stage where UEFA and FIFA, I'm not sure the exact order of green lighting. I think UEFA and FIFA are the keys, because I think if they do give the back in, I think given the lawsuit with FIFA and US Soccer, even though we don't have full disclosure, I imagine that would perhaps not be an issue for US Soccer or CONCACAF. But yeah, still a little bit blurry at this stage.
Yeah, I think the key to it all is going to be when FIFA's working group comes out with either their proposals to be voted upon, but that's going to take time as well. I mean, these things don't go that fast. Or they come out with some interim solution that might allow it to happen. I mean, the only whisper I've picked up from around people in sort of football governance is that it's probably not going to be a straight yes or no answer. It may be something like, we will allow at certain times of year 1 or 2 games to take place in different markets rather than be carte blanche, because it could be very chaotic. If you think about the clubs with Middle Eastern owners and the amount of clubs with American owners now, I mean, it could open the door to a ridiculous amount of games being moved around potentially. So I can see the sense in that FIFA might say, yeah, when MLS isn't playing during the winter break and each league can't do more than once every 2 years or something like that, you could see some sort of compromise on it. I mean, is that being talked about at all in Spain, or is it just being looked at very much as a sort of, our boss are going to get this fixture done sort of way in the press?
A little bit in terms of those things which you touch on, which I think those sort of grey areas, which, like you say, will probably be part of if there was a favourable ruling, say, from FIFA. I think those are key things, like you say, to do with the fact that, not when MLS is on, etc. So you're not completely infringing on it. Not that it's carte blanche, as you say, in terms of just taking games off when and where you want. So that will sort of depend on different areas when they have their local leagues and whatnot. But it's not a major focus in Spain. One big thing, which I don't know how big it would be, is the fact that the weekend they are trying to play there is also Miami Dolphins game that same weekend on the Sunday. I don't know how possible that turnaround is if Barca played on the Saturday. I think they've got the Sunday night football game in Miami that weekend, which I assume is unmovable. I don't know if you can play a game on the
There's
on the
no way
Saturday.
they'd
Obviously,
move
they
it.
host lots of events.
I mean,
No, not move the thingy game, but if it's possible, I don't know how quick they can turn the pitch and stuff around.
Yeah, they could probably do it on a Thursday or Friday and be okay for a Sunday game. I think, with different sports, it's different. They have had games, college games on a Saturday and an NFL game on a Sunday. They try to avoid that, but that's an easy change, isn't it? Because the field's the same and everything. But I think they probably need 3 or 4 days. Probably. I mean, it's an incredible facility, really, in the sense that they have a international tennis tournament there, and they have a Formula One race there, as well as an NFL team and international football games as well. So they're used to it, So if anywhere could do it, they would be able to. Before we finish, Sam, I'm just curious about the sort of situation with. You were talking there about the inability of Spanish clubs to compete with Brentford in terms of transfer spend. And it is a bizarre situation we've found ourselves in where that's true. In the investment, now, we've done a couple of episodes with people about American investment going into Europe and how they prefer to invest in England, and probably the secondary market for various reasons is Italy. We've seen a little bit of money going into Spain. Burnley recently, their owners, ALK Capital, reaching some sort of agreement to take over Espanyol as part of a multi-club ownership structure. But we haven't seen that wave of American investment in the same way as we've seen in England and Italy. Why do you think that is, and do you think there's any chance of that changing in the near term?
Yeah, I don't know exactly why that is. Obviously, we have seen little pockets of things. There's American ownership at Leganes. There's Jorge Mas. I think the Miami owners are involved a little bit at Real Zaragoza.
Yeah,
we saw some at Mallorca. Steve Nash and people like that were sort of loosely involved. Now we've got Espanyol, like you say. I just think, like you say, in terms of that, because there are some, looking at it as an ownership, and I've not done a piece on this or much reporting on this, but you have spoken to sort of some people from time to time. I do think there's some huge clubs that would be hugely appetizing in Spain for American or foreign owners, but they've sort of had their hands so tied before. Not just American owners, we've seen owners from the Middle East, etc., get frustrated at Almeria, for example, because of the sort of the regulations they have to operate under. I'm not entirely up to. I know roughly how PSR works. It's obviously a little bit more sort of flexible than in Spain. Obviously, in Spain, a lot of clubs have a lot of debts. The loose workings is they're given a sort of a salary cap by the league, which includes sort of spending on players, and that's sort of based on their revenue minus their annual revenue minus their debts and non-sporting outgoings for the season. Barcelona's at the moment is between sort of 400 and 500 million a year, and they're sort of on the cusp of getting back into that level. Real Madrid's is 600 and something million at the moment, possibly up towards 700 million per year, and then Atletico I think is around 300 million, and then there are a couple of clubs above 100 million. Everyone else is below 100 million. So they're really sort of clipped in terms of how much they can spend. We're speaking on Friday. The season starts on Saturday, and there's still all the focus and all the headlines are made about Barca. And if you're perhaps outside of Spain, you just think that Barca they have been mismanaged financially, and they're still getting back on their feet, and they are to blame for a lot of their problems. But they're far from the only club in Spain that are struggling to register players in time for the start of the season. And if you're someone that wants to come in and invest and grow a team, it's perhaps not very sort of appetizing, because like I said, I mean, Espanyol is a good example. Historically, they are. I mean, there are bigger clubs. If you look at Valencia, Valencia are the one that comes to mind, obviously under Peter Lim's ownership. But Espanyol, I've always thought, Barcelona's big enough for two clubs. They've got a new stadium that's been open since 2009. They don't always fill it, but they certainly do have the fan base and the potential to fill it if things are going well. I've always thought there's clubs with sort of huge potential, and there's not the sort of problem. If you look at the Premier League, Manchester United finishing 17th. It's hard to imagine that ever happening to Barcelona or Real Madrid, because there simply aren't the amount of teams that challenge them. So there's sort of room in that top four to sort of establish yourself alongside Real Madrid, Barcelona, Atletico Madrid. It's not like you're coming along taking over, say, an Everton, who I don't know if they'd be similar. They've obviously had much more success domestically than Espanyol, but maybe similar in terms of second club in a big football city.
Yeah,
new stadium. Coming in, you'll come in and take over Everton. It's very, very difficult to breach that top 4, top 6, even the top 8 these days with Aston Villa and Newcastle, etc. in England. But there's a lot of room to do that in Spain and grow. So it is interesting, and a large part of it must come down to the financial regulations that are in place that make it difficult to properly invest and grow a club.
Yeah, I think if you're looking to take a team into the Champions League out of a mid-table sort of club, Spain's a much better bet for that than England, you would think, exactly with that Everton Espanyol example being the case. Is there any sense that things might be changing? I mean, if Tebas is putting so much energy and effort into expanding the brand to the United States and around the world, is there much energy and focus going into sorting out the sort of situation domestically to make it more attractive to investors? Or does someone like Tebas not really want foreign investment in Spanish football?
I don't think he's bothered about foreign investment. I don't think there's anyone more outspoken than him against sort of, the financial doping of Manchester City, Paris Saint-Germain. He's probably been one of the most vocal sort of voices against those ownership models. He's sort of, clashed and not been particularly open. Like I say, Almeria did have a similar project, and it's kind of sort of watered down now, and they've been going between the top flight and the second division because that investment wasn't allowed, and it sort of slowed them down. And the owner, who's the same guy who does all the El Turki, I think his name is, who does the boxing in Saudi Arabia, sort of moved on to other projects. He is still involved, and they do spend a little bit, but they also sell, and they're kind of sort of just on the fringes again now. I don't think there's any major... There are tweaks every year. There are tweaks that they sort of make to help the clubs to be a little bit more flexible, to let them go outside their limits. This year, they're letting sort of signings outside the limits, etc., and a couple of little things, but nothing major, and nothing that would sort of change the desire of someone. If someone didn't want to invest for the reasons we just said, not enough to make them think, well, actually, that's enough for us to invest. And I think the reasons he's not that bothered is, one, because it's, it is improving the financial health of the clubs, even if they are sort of, most clubs. I mean, the Getafe president this week has complained he's had to sell his defender to Sunderland, their best defender, for not much money, just to be able to register other players. And he's sort of been critical of the leagues for that, the league's rules for that reason. But it is, forcing clubs to be more shrewd and to sort of tackle their financial problems. And at the same time, you're still seeing a Spanish league which is competing outside of Spain. I think the final which Chelsea won against Real Betis, I think it was the first sort of European final a Spanish club has lost in, I think, the 21st century. And, Real Madrid are, winning multiple Champions Leagues in the last sort of 10 years. Barcelona, not so much recently, but before had won 4. We've seen Villarreal reach semi-finals of the Champions League. We've seen Atletico Madrid reach finals. We've seen Sevilla, Villarreal winning the Europa League regularly. So Tebas's argument is that the rules are in place, they're benefiting the clubs financially, and actually La Liga, while, marketing-wise, finance-wise, they can't compete with the Premier League. They actually do compete with the Premier League clubs in European competitions, yeah?
Absolutely they do, yeah, 100%. No, it's going to be interesting to see how it all spins out. We'll keep a close eye on the soccerbusiness.com on everything that happens in terms of that game in Miami and whether it's going to happen or not and what kind of precedent it might set. Sam, thanks very much indeed for joining us and giving us your insight on all those aspects. It's been really interesting, and people can read your material at ESPN.com, yeah?
Yep, ESPN.com, like you, I'm sure we'll be covering this Miami games of great interest to us moving forward, obviously with the fact that we have the rights to La Liga in the US. Obviously, we're primarily based in the US, and yes, Barcelona is obviously a huge club of huge interest to people around. So yeah, we'll be following it closely as well. Brilliant.
Thanks very much indeed, Sam.
Cheers, Simon.
If you're enjoying this podcast, why not sign up to our weekly newsletter at thesoccerbusiness.com for news, analysis, and data on the North American soccer business world.